electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. This meeting is also being recorded. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. I'd like to read PUB's belief, values, and anti-racist principles, newly composed and approved by the board at our last and actually previous meetings. The PUB believes and acts upon anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions with PUB. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there's wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. How we put these principles into action is by speaking up and speaking out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, and we will focus on the impacted individual or population and condemn the conduct, but not the person. So these guidelines, oh, sorry. I was going to mention the last item on this slide, that these guidelines are intended to guide the conduct at our meetings. They're not intended to restrict anyone's right to speak or compel anyone to speak in a particular way. And I will ask Amy if she would go over the meeting guidelines.
Thank you. My name is Amy Archer Masters, and I'll quickly summarize the guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, state the name of the person you're addressing or state that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the hosts, so please limit any chats to technical and logistical issues. You can use it to sign up for public comment, to ask for technical assistance, or to remind us that you have been waiting to speak and haven't been called on yet. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. The co-host may lower your hand once you've begun speaking. During public comment periods, the public can also raise their hands and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on for the board, presenters, and facilitators when speaking if desired. It's certainly not required. Members of the public and others should leave videos off. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If you are connecting using a phone, please press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. Public comment, as mentioned, will be taken during comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through the chat with PUB staff or raise your hand when the comment period begins. It's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. As stated, this meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Amy. So we will start with a disclosure of communications and public comment, and then at 11:10 we'll move on into our first presentation of the day. We're going to be hearing from the Water Bureau on plans for resuming collections, and some information was sent ahead of time. So in response to that material sent ahead of time, we're hoping the conversation will be mostly Q&A. At 11:45, we'll move into updates from two of our members about our meeting in community that is currently being planned by a subcommittee. And at noon, we'll be hearing from Bureau leadership on the Urban Flood and Safety District. So we will start with disclosure of communications, and anyone that would like to disclose, please unmute yourself and speak up. Not seeing anyone unmuting. I am not seeing any hands raised. So I take that. Oh, I do. Oh, there was one.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Teresa.
I just have my usual communications with my regarding my nonprofit DPAVE, which involves another BES staff member.
Any other disclosures? All right, thank you, pub members. Are there any public comments? Nothing from Amy and Eliza? Have you received anything to indicate
Not
there's
received. This is Amy. I've not received any requests.
Okay, thank you very much. And we are now going to ask for a quick introduction from the Public Information Officer, Jamie Cutie.
I'm just getting my camera on here. Oh,
Good morning.
go. Good morning. Hi. I don't think I've taken, oh, am I on camera?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Jamie Cuddy. I'm the Public Information Officer at the Portland Water Bureau, and I have been working for the city since 2012. I started at the Portland Housing Bureau as the Public Information Officer, and I just wanted to say that I've been getting more involved with Pub in the last few weeks, and I'm here as a resource to provide information. And I would like to begin my my introduction to Pub by meeting with members one-on-one as they are available and interested. So far, Karen and I have met. It's very informal. I just want to understand what you're interested in so that we can be more responsive and more helpful to the Pub. So I'll be reaching out to members, and if you're interested in taking me up on a short virtual coffee, then we will take it from there. So thank you. Thank you for having me on your agenda today.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you for, I apologize for the mispronunciation of your last name. So thank you for letting me know
I knew who you meant.
how to pronounce your last name. All right. So we have just quick item of business is subcommittee meeting minutes from April 7th. And I'm looking, looks like we have 2 corrections to the March 2nd minutes, changed Tuesday to Thursday.
This is Eliza. Those were noted after you all approved them. They're minor date issues, but I just, for 110% transparency, are letting you know that I made those 2 corrections on, you had approved the content.
Thank you. Okay, great. Great to know. I was momentarily confused. I was thinking, wait, I thought we already approved those minutes. Okay, so slight corrections after approval to the March 2nd and March 25th minutes. But the business before us today is an review and approval of the April 7th subcommittee meeting minutes. So I'll allow just 30 seconds or so for people to just speak out or raise hand if they have any corrections to those minutes. I guess I'm looking mostly at the subcommittee members that were present at that meeting. All right, going once, going twice for any corrections to the April 7th subcommittee meeting minutes. Seeing none and seeing no hands raised and hearing none, those minutes are accepted. All right, so Kathy, I believe, is on tap to begin giving us updates on the Water Bureau's plans to resume collections. Are you ready, Kathy?
I am ready. Okay, so thanks for inviting us back to do this update. I'm hoping that the read ahead was helpful to spark more of a Q&A than a presentation. So I'll just hit the highlights that as of the time we ran this report, we're $20.7 million down in collecting revenue. When we were trying to make that, make sense, like, I know how painful a $1,000 bill would be to me. So what does 20.7 million mean to water and BES? And to put that into perspective, we would have to have more than 150 positions held vacant for an entire year to make up a kind of loss like that. So again, we're really struggling with how do we meet our customers' needs in this crazy time versus how do we, make sure that the Bureau is still afloat. So we are desperately trying to do right by both perceptions there. The past due amount has increased over 200,000 just since November. Currently, there's no incentive for customers to make a payment arrangement, or if they do make it, to honor it, because we're continuing to send reminder notices without fees. We were really hoping that just the fact that we started sending reminders again, albeit with softer language, that would, for at least those people that are like, oh, you only bill me 4 times a year, you billed me, I didn't see anything else since then, so I totally forgot. We were hoping that it might spark some of those customers. It didn't. It wasn't as successful as we'd hoped. Our call volumes are down significantly. I gave you an example in there, but January 21st, we only saw 53% calls of what we did in January 2020. You guys were very interested in what factors we would use to make our next decision. So I listed those for you. But certainly we're, looking at the unemployment rate, we're looking at funding that may be out there. We're watching what other people in the industry do. And so for next step, it was interesting when I started preparing this, we were doing really well COVID wise, and now it is, a total surge again. And so, what might be right one day might not be right the next. So, it's a struggle. But our whole goal is to get customers to engage with us. And we're going to continue sending the reminders. Our original phase 2 was going to be with fees this time to see if we can just get their attention. And then of course, if they called, we would be able to, write that off, but we're desperately just trying to get people to understand how important it is that they keep at least paying something on the bill. Because, someday if we go back to, shutting people off, that's not going to be comfortable for anybody. Our payment arrangements are interest-free. We have, we've expanded the representative's ability to make much longer payment arrangements. So we're kind of doing everything we can on our side, but we're not getting the customer response. So we're gonna resume the personal phone calls to different groups, which is super labor intensive and certainly not as efficient as an automated system would be, but we're, taking things into consideration and trying to do this as gently but firmly as we can. So just yesterday we met with a behavioral insight consultant. So we're trying to see, are we just not messaging it right? Or is there anything else we can do? But anecdotally, we have absolutely heard from customers. Their main question is, just please tell me when you're going to shut me off again, because I don't intend to pay until then. So that's a really hard thing for us to manage, because you can make 5 payment arrangements if you want. And if you don't honor any of those, you'll just make another one. There's absolutely no consequences at this point. So, that's kind of where we are. And what what we're trying to do. So if you have questions on that, please let me know.
Thank you for the update, Kathy Cook. So Karen Williams speaking, and I am looking for hands. I see a couple. I didn't quite see who went up first, so I think Robin had hand up first. So Robin, please go ahead with your question.
Yes, Robin here. Thank you. Less of a question, more commentary as a pub member. Well, first, when I think of this, I'm absolutely viewing it as an outside perspective, as someone who would be in a family who would not likely be able to pay a water bill in this type of very uncertain time. In reality, I've never lived through anything like COVID-19 in the 30 years that I've been alive, and I know that people even older than me can say the same. And so I'm not in favor of sending out reminders currently. And the reason for that is that, to my knowledge, payment arrangements within the Bureau can only go up to a year. And that's with COVID extension, essentially, because it was 6 months and now it's a year. And where I sit is, well, we're already over 12 months into a pandemic. And so a 12-month payment option really doesn't seem like it's enough when we're looking at a 3-year economic turnaround. And so I think that we need to, of course, we work on a budget, but we need to be mindful that, like, yes, the vaccine is here. Yes, more and more people are getting access to it. It's becoming, I believe everyone over the age of 16 will be able to have the availability to get vaccinated by on April 19th, but that's just the start. And just where we sit now, if the news is telling me correctly, 1/3 of Oregon's population is half vaccinated. So that's not 25%, that's not 50%, that's not 75%. So I feel that we are still in the middle of this large multidimensional crisis, both health and economic. And we're still in the middle of it. And we're definitely getting relief by the fact that I think that people feel safer. I feel that we are moving closer and closer to a lot more people being vaccinated, but we're still in the middle of it. And using softer language on a payment reminder isn't going to help people. The issue is that we feel mental relief, perhaps due to change of leadership, or just that it feels like we have a grip on what's happening, but people are still there. There's not actually economic relief being offered. People living in poverty, or just people in general, of course, we're going through an economic crisis. They've only been paid like less than $3,000 by the federal government over the course of 12 months. And so if people are saying that they can't pay you until the absolute last minute, I trust and I believe that they are not doing it in a way to avoid responsibility. I trust that they are doing it because shelter and food on their table seems more pertinent than paying their past due water bill. So with that, I would suggest reanalyzing or correcting me if I'm wrong on the fact that payment options are only 12 months. It seems so minor when we're looking at minimum a 3-year economic turnaround that we are still in the part one of.
Well, so 2 things on that. The payment arrangement for a year is what the representatives have been authorized to propose. They have also been informed that if anybody says they can't do that, but that they're willing to start paying something and they just can't afford it, then they have the authority to make exceptions. So, I wish the story that I could tell you is that, oh yeah, people are coming forward to pay. It's just the year that they're struggling with. That's not the case. What we have heard is people are saying, I will not pay you until. So I think the danger in these kinds of conversations is thinking that everybody's in this one category. We have lots of categories of people. I know people who have not been impacted by COVID at all, and financially wise, and they're just saying, I'm not going to pay. And the one thing that, although none of us has any experience in a pandemic like this, the Water Bureau and BES has tremendous experience when our computer system failed to do debt recovery back in 2000. We didn't collect for an entire year, and we understood and quickly learned the behavior of people who just aren't going to pay you until they have to. And they've, I'm not saying everybody by any means, there's absolutely customers out there who legitimately cannot pay. And what we're struggling with is we would like them to either get in touch with us or to respond when we're getting in touch with them, so that we can do something manageable, and so that it isn't such a shock when if and when we get back to what our pre-COVID collection streams were. So yeah, I wish people were calling saying, you know what, I'm going to pay you, but I can't do it in a year. That would be great. But as I tried to illustrate, people aren't even contacting us. They're not responding in any way, shape, or form, in the numbers that we've seen prior. So there's a difference between can and won't. And I don't know the magic of what numbers fall in each group. But that's why we were doing the no fee reminders, to try to nudge those people that can pay and either legitimately forgot, or, just don't think that we're out there, trying to collect any kind of money.
Yeah, okay, I can understand that. Well, I do want to say that I acknowledge that just because I don't pay, like if I don't pay a bill for 3 months doesn't mean that I'm not aware that it is a bill that I have to pay. So I do acknowledge that, but I would just like to push back before I jump off. I'd like to push back on the immediate categorization that people who are not paying might not even be affected. I feel like while that is truth, it's using the time to argue the 10% that might be gaming a system, and not the 90% of people who truly and actually just don't have the capacity to pay for it. I yield my time.
Karen Spencer.
I have a couple of questions. The first is, can you remind me of the pre-pandemic levels of arrearages? Like, was it normally like $2 million or $3 million? Now we're at 20 million. I just don't have context.
I think, just because we, for the majority of our customers, bill quarterly, and just the way that things are due, probably we would have around 10 million that we are chasing anyway. So that would probably be the pre-pandemic norm. So we doubled that.
And then the other question, and I just don't remember this from the ARC meeting, meetings I've attended. What are the, I guess, fees or penalties for late payments that would normally be charged for someone?
The reminder fee prior was $5. And then it's been a while since I looked. I can't remember what the pre-shut off is, maybe $15. And so, yes, that's what the fees were. But before COVID and now, I think it's really important for people to understand that we have always done incredibly flexible payment arrangements. If you have a bill that's due and you call and say, I can't pay it by that date, we will stop all collection fees at that point and make whatever arrangements that we can make. And again, it's like, no interest loan. I mean, the Bureau's not really in the business or in the industry to make, loans like that. And so again, we're really trying to figure out how we stay afloat and do right by the customers, who are paying when they can, and making sure that we're not leaving anybody who can't pay behind. So it's a tough mix, and I'm not saying by any means that we have it figured out. That's why we're trying to do this kind of ease into it solution. And all of our communication has been, hey, we're here to help. We have a tremendous financial assistance program. We make these payment arrangements, but really what we're struggling with is that customers aren't responding.
And if we go with with basically reinstating the fees, what would be the timing, do you think?
Well, originally we had planned that phase 1 would be just sending the reminder notice with no fee, and phase 2 would be that we were adding a fee. But we, as we promised you, we were going to look at all these factors. And so we decided that phase 2 was going to include more phone calls and that kind of thing, but we're still not adding a fee. So I can't give you a date in which we're going to do that, because we're constantly looking at the factors and the elements that we're trying to consider what the right thing to do is. So, I mean, I don't know. At some point, we're going to have to do something. We can't sustain, we can't sustain as a bureau not being able to meet our own needs. But customers also aren't going to be able to dig out if they're not paying anything at all right now.
And I don't mean to hog it. Would it? No, this sounds a little counterintuitive, just as I'm saying it, but sometimes you get more, more with honey than not. Would it make more sense to offer something for folks who could pay now and they're just not doing it as an incentive?
I don't know what that is. I mean, maybe. It's in our bond covenant that we can't give away free water. We can't do debt forgiveness as far as writing off balances like that. So we would have some legal challenges, but I don't know what. I mean, nothing comes to mind on what that would be, but
Okay, thank you.
Worth a thought. Yeah.
Gabby Saldana Lopez.
Yeah, hi, this is Gabby. Yeah, I had a question similar to what Karen was just saying. And I guess you kind of addressed it, Kathy, but what would be, or what could be an incentive for those who make a payment plan and honor those payments? Can there be some sort of incentive for folks to even get on a payment plan to work it out with y'all? Because I definitely feel like if they're not really gaining anything, folks might feel like, what's extra money? I'm going to be in debt anyways. So what can be sort of incentives for folks to pay now? Because right now there really is an incentive to pay at all. And like Karen was saying, how could we do that without having to pull down the hammer and say we're going to shut off your water?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know legally what incentives would be available to us. I guess it's a hard message for me. There are absolutely, again, I'm going to say, those people who cannot pay, the people in the middle, that can and aren't, and saying, well, what's the incentive to them? We're in a business where we provide water in the good faith that you're going to pay for the service we're providing, and we bill after the fact. So we allow you to use it in the trust that you will pay for it when the time comes. So for those looking for an incentive to pay a bill that they legitimately owe. And again, I'm only focusing on those that can and just aren't, that are waiting it out. You know, I don't know. It's a tough message.
Teresa Huang?
Yeah, thank you, Kathy, for providing the context and where the issue is regarding the incentive. I would encourage, Water Bureau and BS to consult, talk to our city attorney and figure out the legal limits on what kind of incentives we can give. And then again, I don't know if this is even legal, like you said, or not, like you said. But I would encourage, maybe like an idea I have is maybe give out a rebate or a voucher if they can pay early. And I'm not sure if that falls into the category of debt forgiveness, but some kind of discount might be an incentive that works. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if Cecilia is on and has any specific knowledge of our limitations other than, what I've stated, that we can't give away free water and we can't do debt forgiveness. We did, it's a small gesture, but we did send emails after people paid that said, hey, we know you have a lot of competing priorities, so we thank you for your payment. We actually got a lot of good feedback about that, but it's not the incentives in which you all are proposing.
Yeah, I would just encourage to talk to our attorneys and find out what kind of discounts or very small incentives that might fall within the legal range. And if there's nothing, is there any other ways that we can make an exception because of the pandemic?
And it's a slight twist on the incentives, but for those who are ready to pay and willing to pay and just can't pay, we try to get them on our financial assistance program, and those are deeply discounted bills. So there is that built-in incentive if you fall into that category.
Julia DeGraw.
All right, thank you. Again, Julia DeGraw, and this is I just want to contribute this. I might be slightly repetitive, but I don't think anybody said this, but it's in the document that you shared. And I think that for the folks who can pay but just won't, it does seem like the sweetness approach is not going to work, right? They're going to just need the hammer, so to speak, the threat of shut off for them to pay. But for I think the vast majority of these folks that we're talking about who really just need to be paying a small amount over time, so they're digging out of the hole so that it doesn't happen all at once for them. I think you have in your next steps the phone calls, which I realize and you outlined very clearly is not a sustainable activity, but I think that's what's missing is this is a nuanced conversation that individuals need to have, where you can kind of help them think through, if you're not paying a little bit over time, you're going to end up possibly with $1,000 bill due all at once, right? It's just helping. I think that human interaction, that it's sensitive and will be helpful for folks. So I think that the phone calls, to me, though unsustainable for the long term, is actually necessary for the unprecedented circumstances that we're under, under a global pandemic situation. Folks probably need that phone call. Maybe they're not noticing the mail. Maybe, maybe they you know, in a robocall, if they hear that pause at the beginning of the phone call, when they answer it, they just, you know, hang up or don't take it. So I realize that not everyone's going to answer their phones, but I am glad to see that you are going to put that effort in with the phone calls, because I do think that that's the thing that's been missing from this equation, is that kind of that ability to have a complex, nuanced conversation with folks. But yeah, I'm glad that we're exploring the incentivization, the incentive conversation as well. And I think people may not be aware of the fact that they can have a reduced bill, which is a form of incentive if they participate in these programs that are available to them. And the phone calls seem to me like, you know, the best strategy you have in your lineup, and hopefully they'll be effective.
Yeah, we found them to be very effective because we were doing it a little bit earlier during this plan. We were hoping that the automated reminders would take the place of that, but we certainly found that that wasn't true, which is why we're putting the calls right back in. And you're right, I think they do like that personal touch.
I think it's just necessary with these circumstances these days, but so thank you.
Cecilia Hoon, I think I missed you before and I apologize. You may have, oh, now you just lowered your hand. Did that mean
No.
that you?
Nope. Well, I was struggling with finding the hand raise button. So this is Cecilia Hoon, Finance Director for the Portland Water Bureau. And just to sort of add to the question about providing potentially an incentive for people to pay their water, sewer, and stormwater bill. Yeah, it does sort of feel like a discount that we would actually have to include in our rate ordinance to allow for that to be offered to our customer. But certainly something that we would still want to be checking in with our attorney and bond counsel, because as Kathy pointed out, our bond covenants is very restricted on deviating from our fee schedule for the most part, and not being able to offer fee service as well. I think the other thing that I would also caution about the incentive is that, we may be thinking about, let's provide an incentive to those that aren't paying now. But as soon as we do offer that, it is available to everyone. That becomes a discount to everyone's bill, right? Anybody, all of a sudden everybody can choose to not pay so that they can get that incentive reduction to their bill. And that becomes, again, a reduction to everyone's bill, a cost that we would then have to, figure out how to recover, resulting in an increase to rates to make up. So I just want to throw that out there.
And I just want to say, to put things in perspective about how hard it's going to be for people to dig out if they choose to pay nothing, is we have, well over 400 accounts that owe over $5,000 right now. We have over 4,400 accounts that owe over $1,000. So even if people started paying whatever, $30, I don't know, something that says, yep, I get it. I know we have this bill, so this is what I can do right now. We are going to work with you. I mean, it's not in the Bureau's mission to, to be a loan company or anything like that, but it's absolutely in our mission to do every single thing that we can for our customers with, and meet them with their ability. But, I've said it a million times, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say it again. The problem right now is not people calling us and getting turned away or getting told no. The problem is that we have yet to communicate the importance for their own good as well, to get in touch with us and work out a payment plan that works. And if you call and you are financially eligible for our program, we're going to make sure that you get on that. So we do have things out there, and good programs, good flexibility, and all of that. We just need people to respond.
Robin Castro.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Robin, pub member again. I think I just had another comment, just reflecting on what's been said. Well, of course, I'm here in favor of helping our community as well as helping the Portland Water Bureau stay afloat. If the Portland Water Bureau does not stay afloat, then we don't have water and our community goes without, then that's unacceptable. I do not like the framing of anyone within the Portland Water Bureau saying that we are not a loan company, especially when you are essentially the governors of the water that give debt outright, and something else. If it's legality, I think that a once in a lifetime, once in a generation pandemic, it could be the right time to think about changing your governing documents and perhaps even trying to evolve our view on our power over water and how we relate it to it being a human right versus something that we govern. I don't necessarily want to promote a rate increase because I know that we are already facing a rate increase, I believe, just with a normal budget outside of COVID. But I'm very much thinking about how if we all need water, then we've all got to input. And if the issue isn't that, there is an issue of people not paying, but I would imagine that the majority of your customers are still paying. And so I don't know if I would support it, but I'm thinking about some sort of rate increase so that everyone would be part of, would help to pay for this debt. But the flip side to that is not putting it on ratepayers and knowing that these unprecedented circumstances, you know, utilities within the Portland city budget is actually like the greatest. We get the most amount of money out of the city budget, and the necessity for sewer, for flushing toilets, for running water is always going to be top priority. And I think that we have to be mindful if we do have a budget decrease, to not necessarily eliminate positions, but be mindful of how much we can actually rally around the necessity of sanitation, water, and sewer as a reason for the city to up our budget. Like, isn't the city council currently in discussions about the upcoming budget, or has the Portland Water Bureau, have any of PUV been advocates for greater money within the pub budget for us? Because I definitely know that there comes times when you have to cut positions, but I wonder how far do we go before we're impacting the long-term sustainability of our water system, our watershed, and just, I guess, providing water for our community. Postscript, now that I realize I had a note on it, I do want to provide some clarification, which is that the push keeps being that people can just apply for the low income assistance. I do want to clarify that in previous pub meetings, it was discussed that yes, people can do that, but in the newly proposed budget, the amount of money given to those low income assistance programs were not drastically increased to provide for the increased need of a pandemic. And we mustn't rely on just that option if that budget itself is not also increased to deal with the influx of newly low income and in need customers.
So again, this is Cecilia here with the finance director for the Portland Water Bureau. Sorry, just sort of responding to Robin's your comments if I'm understanding you correctly. Your comment is to not necessarily raise rates to deal with, you know, sort of the financial shortfall that the Water Bureau is experiencing, and probably BES, to increase rates to make up for that, but to have potentially general fund be making up for that shortfall. If that is what you express, if I'm correct on what you're understanding, what you're saying, the general fund also, there are, you know, general fund as a whole is also short. And there are, the council will need to be making decisions on likely budget cuts in other service areas, police, fire, the general fund bureaus, parks and so forth. We, water and in fact, BES as well, receive very little funding from the general fund, if any at all. We do receive a very small portion to do park-like amenity services because we're prohibited from using ratepayer funds for. Other than that, there are no general fund resources that comes to the Bureau to help pay for the cost of providing water service. And to your point about the low-income discount funding, we budget a certain amount of funding for that, accounting for that sort of discount that we'd be offering, but there is no limit to that. We have not set a limit on, if we hit that sort of projection, then we will stop providing the discount. At this point, not only are we sort of dealing with, I think what Kathy has been talking about as far as accounts in arrear, we are also already, revenue itself is impacted by the pandemic. We are experiencing less demand. So we're managing that also through cost reduction. And then of course, more discounts are being provided. We're talking about, in addition to all of that sort of lost revenue, we are looking at our accounts receivable growing, again, sort of mimicking or channeling Kathy. What we're trying to do is get our customers to respond to us, for those that can pay, do pay. I understand the proposal of providing an incentive, which I do think it is outside of the box thinking, which is great. But again, I do believe that once you offer that, that becomes a discount that we need to make available to everyone because we won't be able to separate those that were paying all of a sudden says, I can't pay and I want the discount. And so, yeah, I think I would just caution sort of that proposal for that reason.
Karen Spencer.
So I somewhat feel like I may be talking out of both sides of my mouth on this, but based on what Cecilia said about if something's offered, it's going to have to be offered to everybody, and we can't screen out, who is unable to pay unless they're actually calling, and who is just unwilling to pay unless prodded. I'm wondering if after we've done the phone calls, after we've done community outreach, whether the Bureau could consider maybe like a pandemic surcharge of some sort to raise the stakes of not having paid. And my thinking on that is maybe that would provide more incentive for folks to pay now versus later.
Okay, looks like, all right. Probably should be wrapping this up, just keeping an eye on the agenda, but Robin?
Yes, thank you. This will be my last comment, which is just, I'm kind of a civic nerd. And so I have screenshots of the Water Bureau's budgets along with other city budgets for the past 5 years. And I just want to make a comment to anyone who doesn't know. In 2016, essentially the Portland Water Bureau has seen an increase from $645 million in the 2016 budget to the 2020-2021 budget is $870 million. So you're looking at over a $200 million increase in 5 years. Of course, costs go up. We need advancing technology. Nothing wrong with needing more money and using it. But I do want to say that if we're down 20 million in collection revenue due to a pandemic, that is still the budget from the 2019 for the Portland Water Bureau was 831 million, and this year's budget is 870 million. So that the amount that we're losing is still, it's substantial, but I want to say that it's unfortunate that we made a $50 million gain in our budget and now we're seeing a deduction But I would like to point out that the Portland Water Bureau's budget has increased by $200 million over the past 5 years, and that I just don't like. I'm not favorable to the current framing that I'm getting, essentially. So yeah, just be mindful. We've gotten more than $20 million in a bump in budget revenue just in the past year. And it absolutely sucks if we can't use it to further advance technology. But if we use it to keep people afloat and giving them water during a major health crisis, I think that we should lean in favor of that.
If I may.
Cecilia? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. If I may clarify the information that you just provided, Robin, those are, they're not the operating budget numbers that you spoke of. They are total fund balance amounts, which includes, our capital program, which includes money that we may have just went out and issued bonds for. So it's essentially, how much money do we have? Our operating budget certainly has increased over the last 5 years, but certainly not to the magnitude that those numbers represent. And I'm happy to, provide some trend information. But that 50 million increase, I think you said, in the last year, that's not the operating budget increase at all by any means.
Yeah, and I'd just like to clarify, I don't want to misrepresent this. It says adopted budget. And it was a screenshot that I got from the city of Portland, I believe, and it's for all offices. And it was something that was provided to just Portlanders in general. But yes, It was an adopted budget, and there might be clarification between that and what you're saying.
Right. Again, the numbers are the adopted budget, but it also includes other funds, and it includes our rate stabilization account that we have been setting money aside for the purpose of smoothing our rate increases. So I just want to clarify that that's not all the money that we be spending on an annual basis. And again, I'm happy to provide more details on the breakout of that and the trending associated with our operating budget. Because for the most part, that's what we're talking about. Our operating budget is about 100 million currently, in round numbers.
Thank you. Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you, Pub members, for highly engaged questions and comments in this extremely difficult area of what we're facing now. So thank you, everyone. And I would like to move on. I think we next have an update. Karen Y. Spencer and Teresa Huang, I believe, have an update on the subcommittee that is looking at organizing a meeting in community. So Teresa and or Karen, please speak up.
Not seeing Teresa unmute, so I will go ahead and unmute. So we reviewed our session in the meeting minutes. If you did the read ahead materials, and we did meet. The initial concept was that we were going to have, and Karen Williams framed this beautifully, an information session on financial assistance, followed by a program where the meat of it would be climate change. And based on the feedback that we got from the bureaus, we determined that we probably need a bigger forum for a discussion of climate change and have a fuller discussion than we could do at a community meeting. Based on that, we tried to retool a program for the community meeting, and my sense is that nobody liked where we landed, and so we are going to retool the community meeting. So it's a little bit delayed, but we are going to get together and talk about what would be a meaningful program for us as a pub to engage with the community on. Teresa, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well. Just yeah, so both of the bureaus did express that they were not comfortable having a meeting, like a part of a meeting, just talking about climate change. So we decided to take that out, and we are now looking for other topics that might be of interest for the public. But right now, all we have is, to talk more about other opportunities and programs that the public can apply for in terms of financial assistance and other discount programs.
Gabby, see a hand raised.
Yeah, just a quick clarifying question. So Karen, Teresa, you said that the subject of climate change was like too big for the meeting, which is why it's taken off the table for the agenda.
Yeah, and maybe that's something that a Water Bureau staff can help answer.
Sure, this is Jamie. Do you want me to jump in there?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. What was discussed at the community meeting is that what was discussed at the subcommittee for the community meeting is that we would like to present climate change to pub. We think that the pub audience is obviously more, has taken the time to be better informed than a general audience. And we'd like to take the topic of climate change to pub before we do at a community meeting. It would just be a different level of information. And from the Bureau's perspective, I work under a no surprises policy. So we didn't want to surprise pub with new information before ever taking it out to the public. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helps me understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have any other questions or comments from our pub members about the meeting and community progress so far? And we do have a couple minutes.
This is Eliza, and Director Jordan has joined, and I would recommend that I'll just say pub recruitment closes next week. So if you've been waiting to tell someone, tell them. And Amy Chomowitz had a non-timely update, so we could. I chatted her, and I'm gonna just channel it and say it would be okay to hold it and move on to the next topic.
Okay, thanks, Eliza. In that case, Director Jordan, I believe you are up if you're there and ready to go.
Thank you. I'm here finally. Wow. 4 hours of chief engineer interviews this morning. So I am really happy to be here. So thanks for having me and for listening to this topic. For many of you, this may be the first time you've heard anything about the new urban flood safety and water quality district that was recently formed. So I've got about 20 slides here or so. Going to try and go through them in 15 or 20 minutes, leaving some time for questions. And obviously this will be an ongoing process. So I'm sure if the board wishes, we can have certainly future discussions. So this will be pretty high level to try and get everybody kind of oriented to both what has happened and where we think we're going right now with the new district. So next slide, please. So this is a picture from 1914, actually a drawing from 1914 that shows the Columbia Slough. It shows the confluence of the Willamette River and the Columbia. And as you can see from this drawing, the floodplain is exactly that. It is a place where the Columbia and Willamette flooded regularly, a lot of different channels, ponds, lakes, and acting like a regular floodplain would act for a major river. Next slide. In 1917, the language at the bottom of the slide is from the petition to Multnomah County to form the Multnomah County Drainage District and the other 3 districts that are with it. If you look closely at the picture, you will see a dotted line around the floodplain and also cross dotted lines, which represent the edges of Peninsula 1, Peninsula 2, Multnomah County Drainage District, and on the east end over by the Sandy River, the Sandy Drainage Improvement Company. So the 4 districts were formed back in 1917. Next slide, please. You can see here horse-drawn construction equipment doing the grading and building the original what they term as dikes in the Sunday Oregon Journal, but the beginning of the levee system for Portland. And that the impetus for building the levees was really to reclaim the land for agriculture purposes. And so it actually, the districts were run by property owners in the area in those days that were basically farmers. Next slide. Things have changed since 1917. You can see from the pictures at the top that the uses of the land in the managed floodplain behind the levees has changed dramatically and now represents a lot of urban type activity in the managed floodplain. And at the bottom of the slide, you can see the levee system in red and again, the 4 districts that were formed back in 1917, and they have not changed. Next slide, please. So the uses now within the managed floodplain are varied and significant for the Portland metropolitan region. And you can see on this slide the transportation, intermodal transportation systems in the managed floodplain, second largest source of drinking water, which the Portland Water Bureau runs. That's the well field out in the area. PDX, of course, is there. A significant number, half the region's manufacturing jobs and 10% of all jobs in Multnomah County, along with residential neighborhoods. 8,000 residents reside in the managed floodplain. Next slide. So why a new district? What's the problem that we're trying to solve here? Back in 2005, I'm sure everyone will remember Hurricane Katrina that hit the New Orleans area initially, and the failure of levees that caused most of the damage from Hurricane Katrina, the result of levee failures. And then in 2012, Superstorm Sandy that hit the Northeast, also significant issues with levee infrastructure there. Next slide. So because of those events, the Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA adjusted the rules and standards and specifications for levees nationwide. And in 2012, FEMA notified the 4 districts that the FEMA certification of those levees was set to expire. Just so everyone realizes, the importance of FEMA certification is that without it, there would be no ability to get low-cost flood insurance on the property behind the levees in the managed floodplain. And that would pretty much halt development within the area. Portland's comprehensive plan has a significant number of new jobs in the future being formed there due to future development. let alone all of the activity that already occurs behind the levees. In 2013, in a response to that certification expiring, the districts got together and asked the governor to establish an Oregon Solutions Project. It's a project where multiple sectors, public, private, nonprofit sectors, come together around a specific problem and attempt to work out what might be a inter or multi-sectoral solution to a problem. These occur across the entire state. They're sponsored by the governor, and they have local, often elected officials, which act as the conveners. Also, in support of that, the Infrastructure Finance Authority in Business Oregon gave a loan to Penn 1 and Penn 2 to begin the analysis of the levies to try and determine what was going to need to be done to bring them back to certification. In 2015, a declaration of cooperation was signed, which is usually the culmination of an Oregon Solutions Project. That signature for that declaration formed what we know now as Levy Ready Columbia, which is a collaboration among a number of folks, which I'll show on a future slide. Also in 2015, the legislature created a levy fund within the Infrastructure Finance Authority that had not existed before, and capitalized that fund with $10 million of lottery-backed bonds for levies statewide. Also then in 2015 to 17 is when in earnest Levy Ready Columbia began to do the engineering assessment and risk analysis of the levees. Next slide, please. This is a statement really talking about that Levy Ready Columbia collaboration and what we're trying to do, which is really assess and ultimately improve the levy system so that it can regain FEMA certification. Next slide. These are the partners in Levy Ready Columbia, the four cities, Portland, Gresham, Troutdale, and Fairview, the port, the Multnomah County Metro. You'll see 4 different state agencies there, 4 different federal agencies there, and the 4 drainage districts, along with some of the neighborhood associations in the area. Next slide. So the challenges of the 4 districts that had been there for a while, but really became evident with the FEMA decertification and having everyone come together and really start to talk about the districts, inefficient administration, 4 districts, 4 different boards, a fragmented approach to risk, each board having its own idea about what was too risky, what was enough investment, et cetera, in capital maintenance. This is a big one, number 3, the assessment, the property assessment mechanism that the district, 3 of the 4 districts have to raise revenue was deemed a property tax. So it was subject to Measure 5 and Measure 50 tax compression, which created number 6, which is an incredible inequitable distribution of the costs, of cost burden across the districts. Also the election, I'll just note that the elections for the districts are among property owners and are done at spring meetings every other year. And they are not exactly what we would call transparent kinds of activities. Next slide, please. So what's the solution? We went through on the Levy Ready Columbia discussion groups, we went through multiple alternatives. One alternative was potentially having Metro take over the whole problem. One was potentially having the port take over the problem because they had very large boundaries that could spread the costs over large areas and potentially not have to burden everyone within the managed floodplain for these extra costs. But ultimately, when folks decided that they were not going to take on those duties, we ultimately went to the legislature. Next slide, please. And our proposal at the legislature, working with Speaker Kotek, was Senate Bill 431, which was really a custom-built piece of legislation for our particular problem in the managed floodplain. So the Senate bill created the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District, and that is the reason I'm here today, is to talk about the new district and what it intends to do. Next slide, please. So the new district, and believe me, we need to find a better name because it doesn't just roll off the tongue easily. The new district has similar duties to the 4 drainage districts. You can see those in the first 4 bullets, but also has some new duties that did not exist in the statutory authority for the drainage districts. And that was to concern ourselves with water quality, habitat, the landscape, promote equity in the work of the district, adapt to the impacts of climate change, and provide public information about the cultural history behind the levees in the managed floodplain. Next slide, please. So the new boundary, you can see on this slide in red, the district, the existing district's boundaries. The white area on the map is the new district, the Urban Flood Safety District boundary. It is Multnomah County within the Portland Metropolitan Urban Growth Boundary, which you can see on the east end of the district. So perhaps not a perfect landmass for allocating benefits and burdens, but a much bigger landmass than we had before. So that's the new district's boundary. Next slide, please. So the legislation that formed the new district envisioned an initial board that is an appointed board to set up the district, establish a sustainable revenue structure. Once that is in place, call for the dissolution of the existing drainage districts, and then set a date for the permanent board to hold an election. So the permanent board will be a combination of elected and appointed. They will absorb the old drainage districts, and they will then have the ongoing responsibility to oversee the management and the capital improvements necessary to maintain the levees over time, and by the way, manage stormwater over time and have an ongoing oversight. Next slide, please. You can see here the makeup of the 2 boards. The initial board, which I am the chair of, has 17 appointed members, something I wouldn't necessarily advocate for anyone wanting to chair a board, but it is what we have and what was envisioned by the legislation. So 4 drainage districts have a representative. The five cities, the 4 I mentioned before, plus Wood Village, have representatives. Port of Portland, Metro, Multnomah County, a resident from the area, a business representative from the area, a nonprofit, an environmental justice nonprofit, and a environmental conservation nonprofit. Those last 5 are appointed by the governor. So then you see when we switch to the permanent board in a few years, there will be 5 elected members, and there will still be 4 appointed members by the governor. Next slide, please. So the new board, the Urban Flood Safety Board, has more tools in its toolbox from a financing perspective than the old drainage districts, which only had one, and that was the property assessment tool. So the new district has that tool and also has the ability to form utilities, which can then assess user fees. It would have the ability to float revenue bonds once it had a sustainable form of revenue. And then it also has the ability to put before the people general obligation bonds, which of course gives it more ability to potentially raise money for capital improvements. Next slide, please. These are the main differences. If you'll recall the slide before that had the challenges on it, many of these are simply alleviating those challenges. So hopefully improved efficiency, not having to manage 4 different boards, 4 different districts. As I just noted, a broader financial toolbox. We hope to have a consistent, proactive approach to risk management of all the infrastructure, a more transparent and inclusive board selection process by the way of an election, and having the governor in a transparent way make some appointments. And probably most importantly for most folks, the broader mission, which allows for multi-benefit kinds of projects. It also allows for use of natural solutions rather than just hard solutions to both stormwater management and flood protection. So we're hoping a lot more flexibility both in finance and in mission to get better solutions in the managed floodplain. Next slide, please. So where are we right now? You saw some of the early work done before 2019 when the new district was formed by the legislature. The formation happened during the long session in 2019. The board, first appointed board, met for the first time in early May of 2020. Of course, we have yet to meet in person as a board. We're still meeting virtually. We were able to approve a budget at our very first meeting for the 21-22 fiscal year. I'll talk a little bit more about funding for the board in a moment. We are now beginning to form subcommittees that will begin different elements of the work regarding strategic planning, mission, vision, and values, the environmental part of the new mission, and obviously that sustainable revenue structure is also going to be worked on. We're hoping that sometime in fiscal 23-24, we would have done enough work and would have engaged with the public enough to be able to establish that ongoing revenue source. If we can do that, then call for the dissolution of the old drainage boards and set an election for the permanent board. And that first election, because special districts have their elections in Oregon in May, I believe, March or May, perhaps it's March, of odd numbered years. We're looking to the spring of 25 for that election of the first the permanent board, its first election. Next slide, please. The funding challenge. I talked earlier about kind of the big challenge that the 4 drainage districts have. The new board has a funding challenge in that it has no revenue source right now. So the legislature, in its wisdom back in 19, granted the new district $500,000 to get up and running. The 4 drainage districts each contributed $10,000 in that first budget that we approved in May of 20. And then the LRC IGA group, which is the group that's been formed among the different governments, the cities and the drainage districts and Multnomah County Metro and the Port, have formed an IGA, an intergovernmental agreement, by which they are all contributing to that LRC mission, the Levee Ready Columbia mission, which was to do the assessment and the engineering analysis of the levees to prepare them for the projects that will be needed for FEMA certification. They decided to contribute $120,000 to that first year fiscal 21 budget. So this current fiscal year, we have about a $660,000 budget. We have been doing the work to set up a new government, bringing on some staffing and some consulting help to work on all of these different issues. But in fiscal 22, we turn into a pumpkin on July 1st. There is no ongoing funding. So what we are doing is we are asking the legislature for the 21-23 biennium for $1 million a year for those 2 years of the biennium. And we are currently working on an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Portland through BES to actually establish a line of credit for the next 5 years for this new district if they do not get funding from the legislature, to be able to draw on that to continue the work. So that's in the works right now. Obviously, the city council and the drainage, the new flood safety board will need to adopt that IGA to be able for the district to draw on that line of credit. Next slide. I think I'm done there. Yes. And I don't know how many minutes that was, but I know that was a whirlwind tour. So I'm happy to take any questions I can regarding the new district.
Thank you very much, Director Jordan. 22 minutes, which gives us about 7 minutes, which by my calculation is maybe enough for 1 or 2 questions, depending on how long the answer is.
Okay.
I see a hand from Robin.
Yeah, thank you. This is Robin, one of the pub members. Thank you, Mike, for your presentation. What I wanted to focus on was actually a recommendation looking specifically. One of your slides talked about initial board versus the permanent board, and it says that the permanent board has 4 elected members and 4 appointed members.
Actually, 5 elected, 4 appointed.
Oh, yes. Yes, you're right. 5 elected, 4 appointed. And I'm looking at the 4 appointed. Those all make sense because Port of Portland is a large stakeholder. We want a flood safety expert, someone who is invested in environmental justice as well as in environmental conservation. So I'm loving the appointed spaces. But when I look to the 5 elected members, I recognize that it seems like these elected members could easily be overwhelmed by business interest. They definitely have the opportunity to be individual. The requirement to be elected is that you either live in the area or you're a business in the area. And so and then there's also 1 urban member from the Multnomah area or Portland area, I guess. But my thing is, just the realization that with 4 out of the 5 elected members having the ability to be a business, I feel like there should be the input of like maybe the 5 members should actually be 1 urban community member, 2 residents from within the district, and then 2 business and nonprofits. And that way the elected voices can be the majority when it comes to community versus majority when it comes to business interests.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts. I think those are certainly legitimate thoughts. I guess one might, well, first of all, the legislation would need to be amended to make the change. So the legislature would have to change the makeup of the board. So that's the mechanism how a change could occur. And then, I guess the bottom line is the same bottom line for any elected body. anybody can run, and the voters of the district can vote for who they think should be on the board. So at the end of the day, it's a democratic process. But I certainly hear what you're saying about you could get a disproportionate balance of the electeds toward business or toward residents. So.
Yeah, and I would just say I've ran for office before, so I recognize the pros and cons of the democratic process. But I do want to say that money in elections still favors business interests over individual community members, and so that's why I would caution overwhelmingly looking at the legislation, perhaps amending the legislation. And yeah, it looks like because I'm a resident, I might actually be able to write my own Oregon state legislator to possibly amend this with that support as well.
Speaker Kotek is very interested in the district. Obviously, it's within her district. So I think she would be interested.
Director Jordan, this is Karen Williams, co-chair and voting member, and I have a question for you.
Sure.
To what extent have Oregon's tribal nations been consulted by any and all of the government agencies involved in the process you described?
I can't speak for all of the entities that have been involved. There's, as you could see in the presentation, quite a number of folks. I can tell you the Bureau of Environmental Services accesses its relationship with the tribes often in a lot of what we do. And in fact, there is discussion of collaborating with the tribes on some first foods regarding our restoration of certain areas in the managed floodplain. And I know that the tribes are required consultative bodies when the Corps of Engineers does its work. I think people sometimes argue that the Corps is not consulting enough, not only with tribes, but with others. But also a major part of the discussion that is just beginning with the new board right now. But you'll recall one aspect of the legislation talks about the cultural heritage of the floodplain. And of course, the ancestral lands of many tribes in the region call the Columbia Slough part of their territory. And so I think ongoing in the future, the new district will have a major outreach relationship with the tribes.
All right, we are at 12:29. Thank you very much, Director Jordan, for your really interesting presentation.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it was very, very informative. Thank you. So with the 1 minute, I just will, we don't really have time for full announcements, but I do have, let's see, 2 that I would like to make. Very quick ones. One is just a reminder to all pub members, when you have a request for information from one of the bureaus, to please send that request through Eliza or Amy. And Dory co-chair, Dory Robinson co-chair, also put this forward at our last meeting, but this is really essential for us as a board and a public consultative body to keep track of and organize the information that we are asking for and the information that's coming back from the bureaus, so that we can carry out our public duty transparently. So please remember that. And last announcement regarding what we're doing next, which is usually how we close our meetings, that next week, co-chair Dory Robinson and myself we'll be doing our regular check-in with both staff, Amy and Eliza, and Bureau leadership. We do this about quarterly, and we have a pretty darn good list of priority topics from the pub that you all want to engage with and hear from. And we're going to be working with Bureau leadership next week to sort out when the subject matter experts that can speak to those issues will be available, and should be able to provide you that information at the next meeting. So with that, are there any closing comments or announcements from any pub members before we adjourn?
This is Eliza, and I'll remind Karen and Teresa, Jamie, and I saw Megan just joined. We're going to be looking at our schedules right after this meeting, so don't leave with everybody else.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the reminder, Eliza. I was almost ready to hit the leave button, so thank you for that reminder. All right, well, thank you, everyone, members of the public, city staff and leaders, and mostly pub members for participating in this meeting, and we are adjourned.
Bye, everyone.